You're listening to the Cash News Podcast with Tom Meehan and Sean Ferrari.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cash News Podcast. Today, I think we're on episode 22, and we are actually, I think at this point, Sean, I think we're taping and dropping the same week, which is where I'd love to be. Although it's very hard because Sean and I, while we love to talk to each other, we talk to each other on a Friday and then a Tuesday, and we get confused. So, Sean, how you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I know it seems like we just chatted, but yes, there's, as always, a lot to cover, and we want to keep the discussion going. We're just hanging in there, pushing forward. We thought we'd spend a little time today talking about some tax stuff. I know don't everyone get too excited or turn us off, but we'll try to keep it somewhat interesting. It is tax season. I know I've started to get my stuff together and fill out my electronic stuff and see what I can get filed. I think Tom and I were just kind of looking around this morning for what to chat about, and I happened to see on the news some info on the IRS, I think for next year, not this year, starting to talk about how they're going to tax income on the, made through the Venmo or PayPal applications, those third party systems that we've talked about a lot. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about that and some other things today, just to kick around the tax topic a little bit.
Yeah, awesome, Sean. And so we're gonna put a kind of statement out here. Is neither Sean or I are tax experts, so please.
That is very true. Yeah,
so
do never take any tax advice from me.
You don't take
or
any
Tom.
tax advice from us. We're going to talk about some of the current trends and things we're seeing, but I say that half jokingly, but it's with this particular topic, it is in one sense new, in another sense it's not. So for all the listeners that have used eBay and used PayPal bill to buy services, that seller is entitled to pay tax. There was some gray for many years, and this is where my tax expertise is gray, is that there's a form called a 1099-K that some of these services would put out if you had an X amount of transactions, and it was very kind of fluid from service to service. Recently, and when I say recently, in the past few years, Airbnb, Etsy, DoorDash, Uber, all of those had a really established process, and it was kind of what we typically probably hear is if it was above $600, they would issue this 1099-K. But those are all apps that were designed to sell services and goods, so it's common sense. I think where it becomes gray is, what do you do when you have a Zelle or a Venmo or a PayPal, where Sean and I could go have a drink at a bar and I don't have any cash on me, and I say, Sean, I'm gonna Venmo you the cash. I'm not buying services from Sean. I'm actually just the same way I would hand Sean a $20 bill to pay the bill. And that's where I think it becomes a little gray. I think everything I'm reading alludes to, in 2023, these apps will all have a process to manage this. But if Sean and I, and we do actually go to trade shows, and this is a very real thing that could happen, is, here, let me Venmo you for the food. We of course both carry cash, jokingly, right? Because we talk about it all the time. But the reality is, it's very common today to use Venmo to pay folks because of the convenience factor, or Zelle or PayPal. And I know PayPal has some banking things there, but I thought it was interesting, Sean, that Zelle had a real they had a statement of, we are not a bank, we are just a connector between people. So it's up to the consumer or the payee or payee to identify this. I'm not sure the IRS will allow that for long. I think they're going to kind of get involved, but
yeah, I mean, I guess the difference with Zelle compared to the other two is they don't hold anything. Like, you never have a balance sitting there, right? So it is truly just the money is flowing through that application, or whatever you want to call it, that interchange. It's a messaging service, really. It's telling one bank to debit and one bank to credit, and that's it. So I think they're basically saying either of the banks on either end need to do this reporting, like always. So figure out how to do that. It's on the consumer and on the bank. The other entities, like a Venmo or a PayPal, can hold, right? So you're not necessarily ending at a bank. I think personally it's a horrible idea to keep a large balance anywhere in those rather than at a bank, but you can. And I'm sure a lot of people do.
Yeah, PayPal, Venmo, the Cash App, those are probably really the key ones that really fall within this. And I think it comes down to goods and services, right? If you're not selling goods or services, you're not technically supposed to pay taxes. We were joking before the show of, this is especially with business folks that travel, there isn't necessarily a limit on what you might Venmo, especially in an environment where we might go out with a large group of people and Sean and I are covering the bill, because
Sure.
of that, it wouldn't be out of the question to have several $1,000s exchange in that. And that's where I think the IRS is kind of pushing the gray of, well, the way I perceive this is if it's not goods and services, you're not going to claim it, you're not going to pay taxes on it. But you have to be aware if you're using Venmo a lot, if you're using Cash App a lot, that you might get audited and you might have to then go back and explain it. I can almost guarantee in 2023, all of the apps will have a button to press goods and services. I think PayPal already has that.
Yeah.
But I think that'll kind of be the trigger. And then I'm sure there'll be some behind the scenes numbers, because as we all know, and this is kind of why cash is king, right? We talk about this all the time, is these are not anonymous, right? Like Venmo knows exactly how much money you have, where you got it from. Cash App knows. Whether they say they're going to disclose it or not, the reality is there's a record of that money. So if I send Sean $10,000 right now, there's no way for me to be anonymous.
I think we should try it, Tom. Just send me the 10 grand and let's see what happens.
Yeah. But I mean, like, there's no way to be anonymous. And all joking aside, I'm not a big enough user of Venmo to know, but I'm sure between my wife and I, we've done more than $1,000 of back and forth in the year that were things like, gas, here, thanks for picking the kids up, or thanks for dropping off the groceries type of thing.
Right.
And I know this is like a trend of the time right now, that we wouldn't do this before, but like a lot of times people come over the house and as opposed to bringing something, we'll order like DoorDash and they'll Venmo us. So that's not, that happens pretty regularly. So I definitely think it's a space to watch.
Yeah, I think it's a space to watch, and I think it's, and the privacy angle is funny on it. It's like we want it both ways at some point, because Venmo is very interesting. I'm sure most folks that are listening to this have probably used it at one point or another, but like, unless you click like the little private thing, like who you pay Venmo to, and like, if you want to say what it's for, like gets broadcast to the entire like Venmo network. Sean just paid Tom $20 for dinner. Thanks. It was great. And like the world sees it. And then all of a sudden, on the other hand, we're like, oh no, I don't want you to know what I'm doing with my money. So it's this very interesting dichotomy of privacy. And maybe one end is I don't want the government knowing what I'm doing with my money because I have to be taxed on it. I don't care if the rest of the world knows, but got news for you. If the rest of the world knows, the government knows too. So, but it's interesting to kind of go through this. And I do wonder, depending how easy or complex or just confusing it is in the future to try to track some of this stuff, depending on where the tax angle of this goes, if there will be a push back to the cash side of things, just from people, not wanting to have to worry about whatever record keeping, although presumably it would be electronic and easy, but having to worry about the record keeping, or just getting into this scenario at all and say, you know what, I'm just going to go to the ATM and I'm just going to pay you some cash and not worry about it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's a valid point, because I think one of the things for me, and you and I talk about this all the time, is I don't use Venmo because I like Venmo. I use Venmo because it's convenient, right? So if I have to start records and pay attention, then it's certainly not convenient, and it would be much easier for me to say, Sean, I'll literally let's go to the ATM and let's get the money, or tomorrow I'll give you the cash. It's certainly the only reason that I use Venmo today is because it's convenient. It's not like, oh, I love the technology aspect of it. And, I'm definitely a techie guy that likes to try things, but I don't even have the Cash App. I wouldn't use the Cash App because from the cybersecurity side of Tom, the Cash App is often, and no disrespect to the Cash App here, but it was often used for payment for nefarious things early on. And it isn't anymore. It's a very reputable app. I'm not saying that's bad, but I just remember when I do dark web investigations, it's always, if you have Cash App and you send this to me, I'll do that. After I see, like, I don't ever see anybody on the dark web saying, use Venmo. Send me your Venmo. Like, so,
Right.
and that's probably the privacy angle, right? That you just talked about, that Cash App is more private, but PayPal, it actually not, again, this has nothing to do with PayPal. It isn't uncommon to go on some of these underground boards and people will take a PayPal payment for, credit card information, IDs, things of that nature. So definitely something to watch. And I think it goes back to the anatomy of cash. And that leads me to, well, we're not going to get too far into detail. It's the same conversation with Bitcoin. Like, there's been the last 6 months, the government's going to crack down on taxes. And well, I think there's dual purpose here. I definitely think the Colonial Pipeline and JBS, because of those huge ransomwares, the government said, like, no, we're going to make it harder for criminals to operate. But at the end of the day, we all know that we have to pay tax. So, I can see regulation coming, and it's already happening. I know that any of the brokers that are big brokers, you're going to get a tax statement. You're going to get a tax statement, or you're going to get a letter saying it's your responsibility to claim this, so that they have due diligence. And we all know, like, if you get any electronic letter, whether it says, like, the Zelle comment of you're responsible for doing this, when an audit comes up, that's going to be, hey, you didn't know? Here's the issue. So I definitely see the regulatory coming, and I actually welcome the regulatory side of it. I know that Bitcoin, using as an example, or crypto is supposed to be decentralized and anonymized, but we know that that's not the way it works. That allows for anti-money laundering, that allows the money laundering, so it doesn't follow AML. It allows for all sorts of things. So I think taxes are natural, right?
They are, and it's a really ballooning space from a tech development side in that whole Bitcoin cyber currency trading world. I was just on the phone with a company who might be coming on board to participate in our digital currency conference coming up at the end of February in Washington, D.C. at the Renaissance Hotel. Sorry, just thought I'd throw that out there. But I was just talking to a company that hopefully will be there, whose really sole mission right now is developing, and the IRS just contracted with them, actually, and they're developing an interface and platform and all the technology to go through your Coinbase or whatever your brokerage is of choice for digital currency, and be able to do all the tax reporting and calculations and interfaces that all these groups need. So it's happening, and it's an emerging topic, and governments all over the world are struggling with it. And there's a lot of companies, including this one, that are in the weeds of it, getting the technology ready to be able to make it one, I guess, easy for people to do, like, just like reporting taxes on your stock sales. You get a statement and it's like, here it is. Okay, cool. It's something along the same lines. And because they're interfacing with the IRS and working on all that sort of stuff, that side of the equation will already have the numbers, much like they already do. So it's, the technology is coming to facilitate all of this and make it so it's a lot less, you could say burdensome, you could say, or a lot less able to be hidden, but nonetheless, it's coming.
Yeah, and I think actually what your comment there is that, so blockchain, and we're not going to get super technical because I'm not a blockchain expert, obviously. I follow it probably closer than the average person, but, like, there are ways to manage the tax implication without completely giving up your anonymity. So that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to avoid paying taxes, but there are ways to utilize a decentralized method to still identify you owe taxes, but not necessarily where those funds came from. And I think that's the quasi space that we're in, is how do we keep the decentralized piece of it and still manage it? There are ways to do it. Today, I can identify, if Sean sends me money, you can go online and see that Sean sent me money. You just don't know I'm Sean and that. that piece. That's the whole idea of the blockchain, is a way to manage it, but it's decentralized. So I think this is a space that isn't going away. And I continuously say, because Sean and I laugh about this, is digital currency and cryptocurrency are very different. We consistently see central banks saying, that they're looking at ways to come up with digital currency. That's not crypto. That's basically a digital form of fiat. It is not about anonymity. It's about ease, and that whole thing I said before about that ease of use, that comfortable, the younger generation, it's about the way that the money exchanges less than paper versus digital. So when a central bank says they're backing a digital currency, it's essentially digitizing a note. And I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's not the same as what Sean and I are talking about Bitcoin and things. In the future world, we may come upon a pace where you go to the bank and you say, I want to take $1,000 out, but I want it digitally, and in your digital currency versus the notes. That isn't the same as a debit card either. It's a very different thing. And what the easiest way I can kind of explain it is, a digital note would be authenticated in a chain of custody in the blockchain, saying this digital note belongs to Sean and only belongs to Sean until he gives it to somebody else. And I think that is what I often am asked questions about. And what I say is, Sean and I often say this because there's no reason not to. We like to get experts on. When neither one of us are experts in crypto. I have probably a higher degree of knowledge from the risk side than the average person, but I love to get the experts on to talk. But I also am alarmed by the amount of communication on the internet of people going, oh, did you hear the Fed is making its own cryptocurrency? And it's like, no, that's not what the Fed is saying. Or the Central Bank of Mexico, that's not what they're saying. Unlike El Salvador is saying we're accepting Bitcoin. That's not even saying, that's just saying they're allowing it to be a tender. So even that isn't the same. And there's a lot of crossover in those conversations. So whoever's listening, if this is intriguing and exciting to you, you should go to DC and spend a day learning about it, because I'm actually really excited about the digital piece of the conference. And I know you have a full day dedicated to this, which is with a really, really good lineup of speakers. You talk about experts that really do know the space.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a great day, February 25th. And yeah, we've got all sorts of regulators. We've got providers, we've got central banks, just everybody, IMF, World Bank, digital currency think tank. So we got some NYU, just a whole bunch of folks that are going to be there and talk about it. And there's so many areas to go into it. We're thrilled how it's kind of come together, and looking like, at this point we'll have, I think we're up to almost 125 or 150 registered. So it's a good crowd shaping up. We still got a couple weeks to go. So it's going to be a good gathering for the day. The other thing in this space that I think just speaks to the difficulty I mean, yes, there is a gazillion different crypto, to Tom's point, there's a lot of cryptocurrencies out there. I don't even know the count anymore, but it's more than you can fathom, really. There's so many. But when you're starting to talk about a stable digital currency, right, that's an agreed upon value with a market mass that is widely accepted, this is not an easy thing to do. And the other news this past week was DM has basically closed up shop, right? So there you had, and that was the one, remember, it was Facebook, it was Google, originally it was this conglomeration of tech giants that said, we're going to create a digital currency. Facebook changed names once or twice, and it was last known as DM. Of course, it all came out when Facebook was having its initial privacy testimonies at Congress and all that, which really wasn't good timing for a Facebook-backed currency to be introduced. But nonetheless, over the past few years, it's been tried, but it just hasn't. It faced headwinds from regulators and central banks trying to understand the threat to the monetary system and what this private digital currency would do to normal government issued currency. or central bank issued currency. And it just never was able to coalesce. But I think it's interesting when you think of, when you get the tech giants together to develop something like this. Initially, a lot of people thought, well, this is going to be the one. This is it. If anybody has a chance of making a private sector digital currency work, it's these guys. And even that couldn't face the uphill.
Yeah, I think that I think you hit the nail on the head though. It had a lot to do with Facebook's timing, and there was a lot of privacy concerns about, do we want, the people that already have more information about us than anybody in the world, putting together digital currency. So as that is my space, right? The cybersecurity and risk space. The reality is, while it's a double-edged sword, they probably would have done the best job at making it work, work together. And I think that social media in general and Google, and I write about this all the time. I talk about this all the time. Not that it gets a bad name, but it's remarkable to me that people misunderstand how they create revenue. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, we are the product, right? If you use any of those, we are the product. That's how they create the revenue. Google creates their revenue when you search by being able to go, I know a lot about Sean, so I know what Sean's search is. I know a lot about Tom. I know they're connected. I now can create a profile for a person like Sean or Tom, same age group, same demographic, same industry. You know what? We know that Sean and Tom went to Vegas together. When they were searching, they were looking for places to eat. They take all of that information and they create advertising around it. And it sounds silly to me when people go, well, they have all of our information. We're giving them all our information. I wrote an article many years ago that we gave up privacy for convenience. And I use social media regularly. And my comment is that, and I'll stay true to it, is that the things I share in social media, I'm aware of that they're not going away. I'm aware of the risk, but I'm also aware of the fact that it is nearly impossible today, unless you are not digitally connected to anything, to not have some level of risk. It's just being smart about it. So when I just circle back, when I hear like people going like, oh man, Facebook, Google creating a digital currency would be terrible, it's kind of like me going like, I don't know, because they have the infrastructure to really support it. I think with the challenge is, do we want these tech giants to have more power than they already have? And I spend a lot of time in my I have another, do a lot of time on another podcast about this very topic of privacy and what consumers give up. And I think Bitcoin and cryptocurrency has given a sense that it's completely anonymous. And my answer, and I'll never forget, I think Sean, you and I actually might have done a podcast around this time, but I know we talked about this, when the FBI seized, I don't know, 8 million, significant amount of money. I can't remember off the top of my head now, from the JBL or from the Colonial Pipeline issue, and from the JBLs, people said it's impossible, and I'm like, no, it's not possible. if it's digitized, there's a trail, and when the U.S. government wants to do something, they can do it, and so nothing is really anonymous, except for cash. Like, I hate to say that, it really is. I mean, that is the real anonymous piece. And yes, we are the Cash News Podcast and we talk about cash, but that's a factual statement. It's not that's not a self-fulfilling prophecy for the Cash News Podcast. We weren't going to necessarily call it the Cash News Podcast, by the way. We just thought it was a cool name. It was really about currency and payments. But so let me ask you your opinion on this. What do you think in the next 12 months is going to happen with some of this crypto? I know that you're not an expert in crypto, but the market's crashing. You've got double peaks. So you got one set of analysts saying that crypto is going to spike again and invest. You got another set of analysts that says it's ripe for adjustment. Sean, for everybody, stay tuned now, because we're going to get Sean.
Yeah. If no offense, but if I knew what was going to happen, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this podcast. Not that I don't love talking to you, but no, I think, I think it's a volatile market. It's what we've said all along. I think yes, it's crashing right now. I think it's going to go up again. I don't think I in the grand scheme of things, I still think there's so much development going on in the crypto space and new things coming out and people still tinkering around it that I don't think it's reaching any sort of like normal looking growth thing where this is a crash and then it's going to re-baseline lower and like slowly trend up. I think it's still going to be, there's going to be high peaks, there's going to be low valleys, it's still going to bounce all over the place. And we're still, as we said, years away from any sort of like massively, used government issued, central bank issued currency that could, again, as we've talked about, it's a different thing, and it's a different use case. So yeah. I mean, I think it's just going to be more of the same. We're going through a crash now, and it's what we've said all along with the crypto stuff. If you want to play with it and invest in it, by all means, go for it. But don't put anything in there you don't care about losing.
Yeah, so my sentiment exactly. That's exactly. People always ask me, and I'm like, I don't have enough money to play it with that I get concerned if I put any money in it. It's basically and this is such a bad analogy for our audience because I know they're gonna, I know Sean and I will get yelled at when we see the crypto guys later, is that I equate it to, I could spend money in Vegas at the blackjack table, or I could put it in crypto, and that's the way I look at it. And that's not a negative statement. I'm with you, Sean. I think this is an adjustment that will go up. I think it's here to stay. I've said it a million times. I think that it has not reached its peak. But I also think there are so many coins that we as an industry need to narrow because there's just so much out there. But again, that's the whole idea of crypto, to allow it to be, kind of what it is. And I'm disappointed that, the tech companies didn't come up with a crypto, because I was really curious to see how it would play out. Not in a joking manner, really. I was really curious to see how they would utilize all that data they have to try to position it differently. So switching gears a little, because we talked about, we always talk about COVID and tax time. I'm sure our listeners, at least if you live in the Northeast, it did make national news. I think it even made international news. There were 2 nurses in New York that were arrested for selling $1.5 million worth of fake vaccination cards. So we talked about fake vaccination cards, but this story is like one of those stories that when you read it, as you continue to read it, you're like, oh my goodness. And it just keeps getting better and better in the sense of a train wreck. So 2 nurses in New York were selling fake vaccination cards. Adults, I think it was 200 and change, and kids, it was $85. They actually kept a ledger. And so somehow, in typical media fashion, this ledger got out. So there's actually pictures of a handwritten ledger. And when they went to one of the nurses' houses, there was $900,000 in cash. We talk about taxes. You're like, what do you do with $900,000 in cash? Like, that's a problem to begin with. And then to further exasperate or make the story what I'd say only in COVID times, is one of the nurses' husbands is a police officer. So it's just this whole scenario of where we're at with COVID. And, immediately I stuck to the $1.5 million in cash, and how do they do it? Why do they keep a ledger? That was my first thing. Like, what's this ledger for? Was it to split the proceeds? Like,
they're very savvy business people. They want to know where their money's coming from and where it's going. And
yeah, I mean, I'm always amazed when this isn't like, so I used to do a lot of investigations where you have someone cooking the books, where you have to have a ledger because they have to keep track. This is 2 people selling fake vaccination cards. And I kind of am shocked that the police go, oh, thanks for this notebook, which makes our already really solid case basically impossible for you to dispute. Oh, and the shoebox is full of money. And I don't know that they were in shoeboxes, by the way. I just saw pictures of money, really help. But it really talks about what we talked about. And I know this is not necessarily what our listener audience is. They can do it because it is cash. They can, they screwed up, but the reality is they don't know if there's the reason they have $1.5 million is because that ledger is what was written, and it wasn't. If that ledger wasn't written and they didn't admit it, they might not ever know how much.
What can you find and count? Right. Yeah, you never know. I mean, we at the Federal Reserve, as when we would occasionally, there would be somebody that tried to get a little fancy and pocket a few notes that they were processing here or there, and the common answer every time you catch somebody doing it You catch them all the time. Might take a little time sometimes, but you always catch them. The answer is always like, so how much did you take? And it's always like, well, how much did you find? That's all you can. That's all you can do.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was, as you know, I did investigations, and when you do an interrogation, the goal is not to get them to admit to what you know, right? Like, you want to get the truth, but really it's getting the truth. But our focal point was not for you to validate what we could prove. Newsflash, we could prove it, was to really underpin what else was there. And remarkably, this is a factual statement. 9 out of 10 times, if you ask the question right, you find out what was there. So I know we went, although we thought this would be really short.
We kept going. We always keep talking.
We keep talking. So look, I'm excited. I think you need to tell everybody again, because I don't think people have heard it enough. What's going on at the end of February?
Yeah, so at the end of February, we're going to talk about all this stuff and more at the Banknote and Currency Conference and the Digital Currency Conference, all in one fascinating, fun-filled week from the 21st to the 25th of February, which is this month now. So come and see Tom and me and about 40 other live speakers from all over the world on stage. Probably, actually, if that 40 just for Banknote and Currency Conference, probably another 20 for DCC. So 60 experts talking about all this stuff with receptions and fun. There'll be a show, there'll be a dinner involved. We got some magic. We got some dueling pianos. It's going to be a blast. Trying to get everybody together again in a COVID-friendly and safe way. So we are thrilled and looking forward to it. So come see us. If you need more information on that, you can hit me or Tom up, and Tom will get you over to me. But you can also look at currencyresearch.com for plenty of information on all of these events. But we would love to see you there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be there. We're going to be taping and potentially doing some live podcasts. I think we actually have it slotted to do one a day, which is awesome. And in case you can't tell, Sean and I have completely different banter when we're together. So it's always exciting when we're together. We'll have guests. I'm sure we'll be able to grab people to come on. And then I just, COVID, I thought I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, because you said COVID safe environment. So just this morning, I heard news that the University of Florida has officially, this is a big deal because this is a very large university, if you think compared to, they've officially classified COVID as an endemic instead of a pandemic. So they've actually changed their testing guidelines. They changed all of that. Why is that important? Because you have an academic institute, and one of the largest in the country. I wish I knew that what number it is, but I know it's one of the largest in the United States. And they are officially saying that they are classifying COVID as an endemic, and that really changes the whole scope. So if we continue to see that changing, they've actually changed their testing guidelines, they've changed everything, which is probably the most promising sign, for people like Sean and I who travel quite a bit. So I thought that'd be a good way to end the podcast here. I'm super excited to see Sean and everybody. It's going to be a great event. I think, Sean, we're expecting at least 500 people, right?
Yeah, we're up over 500 now. So, we'll be right around there.
That's great. And then, because I know Sean said 120 or 100, that's for the digital currency, right, that one day. Yes. The other event is going to be pretty large. So we're really excited to see each other. And I still think you're going to get another dose of us before then, because we still have another podcast. So,
people will come. Yeah.
All right. Very good. Signing off. Everybody stay safe. Thanks for listening. Subscribe, share it. Please, please, please subscribe. I love when people say they listen but don't subscribe, but please subscribe. And if you want, we're on YouTube too, so you can actually see us, and it's comical, so you should see us. All right.
Exactly.
Talk soon.
Take care, everybody.